Is it on? Is it on? Well done, Nicola. Fantastic insights. Before we begin, I just want to ask you all three questions. And so in the last week, who has read a newspaper or a magazine? A handful, maybe on the airplane. Second question, who has watched broadcast TV or radio? Hands up, maybe in the car, still quite a lot. And lastly, who has scrolled on their phone on a social media feed? And that can be LinkedIn, a lot of us. Now, the reason why I ask this question is because as traditional media's role in our lives play less and less and social media rises, the way in which we consume content, whether it's traditional or social media, has changed. And I'll go through that. G'day guys, my name is Thanh, the fruit nerd. I'm a second generation fruiterer based in Melbourne. I'm also on the board of Fresh State, which is the wholesalers in Victoria. And in addition to that, I used to work for Coles as a national buyer, buying kiwi fruit from New Zealand. In addition to growing up in the industry, I also work in media. I've written a book, the first book in Australia to ever be written about fruit in 30 years. I have produced my own TV show, which is on ABC and SBS, and I'm a regular on radio. So I understand traditional media and its role, but in addition to that, I've also got over 150 million views on social media, educating and engaging audiences about their fruit and veg. So for me, growing up in the industry, I always wanted there to be somebody to teach me about fruit and veg, and that's why I did what I did, working into the media space. And in the last 18 months, I've also been traveling the world on the Nuffield Scholarship, interviewing the best content creators in agriculture and horticulture, interviewing media companies and corporate communicators to find out where in the world we have best communicated our farming story. Now, I'm going to talk about 5 things today. The first thing is communicating to consumers in 2026. The second is trust building and the role of content creators. Third, rethinking negative PR as an opportunity, not a crisis. Fourth, a generation that skips technology and the role that social media can play or must play in a world of AI. And lastly, where to next for our industry, whether it's a farming business, a plastics business, farmers themselves, export companies, where do we start? Where do we move forward? So I started with traditional media and social media. Now, the reason why I did this and asked those questions is because the way in which our industry has looked at producing social media is similar to how we have in traditional media. Traditional media was very one way. We produced a campaign, we had a message, we put it on billboards, on TV, radio advertisements, and consumers learned, listened, and they decided whether they wanted to choose that product, whether they wanted to pick a kiwi fruit or an avocado or an apple. But social media is two-way. When you make a post and you're scrolling on your feed, you're liking, you're sharing, you're commenting. And those comments might not be kind. But it's a two-way conversation. So the type of work and content that we produce needs to be conversational. And so we need to have a change in mindset. Previously, traditional media had a very finite distribution channel. There were gatekeepers, the television broadcasters, the radio channels, whilst social media has an infinite distribution. I can just name you a few: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Discord, Twitch, and then you look at the countries in which New Zealand exports go to. In China, in Asia, whether it's, Xiaohongshu or WeChat, there are not millions, but there is a plethora of different channels. And so the game has changed, and that requires us to rethink the rules of producing work, producing media work. So how does social media work? For me, I have over 150 views on social media, but my first 40 million views was unpaid. So you might ask, what was I doing with those hundreds of videos? And what was the purpose of it? It was building trust. See, social media is about building trust first to have the social license to then grow from that. And I think that for me and as a content creator, that's what we often misconstrued in the social media world. But that's also the role that content creators can play. Now, if you look at most of our organizations, whether it's a farming business, an industry organization, we have a communications team and we have a marketing team. And everybody always asks, Thanh, well, let's get our return on investment on marketing. But how do you measure that in a world where, as in fruit and veg, we don't send fruit and veg to our consumer. We're not a direct-to-consumer business. Well, social media plays both the comms role and the marketing role. And I think that we need to change our mindset to think that. We need to build the social license first piece before we start marketing our products. That trust in the first 40 million views that I had was showing what I do every day, whether it's in the wholesale market, on the farm level, at the retail store. It was building my voice as a person of expertise so that later on, once I started to do industry work, people started to listen. Traditional media is no longer the front door to the public. Social media is. And we often see that now, where traditional media often comments on what's happening in social media. So the opportunity for us is to be where consumers are at, be on the correct platforms, depending on the markets we are in, to have conversational content that's memorable, and to also have some control of our narrative instead of it being controlled by somebody else. Now, the second part is the role of the creator. So, as a creator myself, I often think, do I believe in an institution or an organization or a corporate body, or do I believe in a person? You will see that on social media, most of the creators are people, and businesses often don't have as much of a strong voice. And why is that the case? Corporates over the last 20 years and industries have seen, well, I shouldn't say industries, but mainly businesses and corporates have seen a loss of distrust in the public, including even our politicians and parties, whilst our belief in people has stayed quite strong. And why is that the case? And why is that the case in social media? It's because I want to hear from a person. I want to hear from Olga over here. I don't want to hear from a corporate because I might not believe in the corporate. And the way we get around that as industries and farming businesses is to show up, to show our faces. We are the ambassadors, the people working within the industry, whether it's a picker, whether it's a packer, a ripener, somebody working in the packaging space. We're all part of that transparent story, which Nicola mentioned. And that's how we represent brands, and that's how brands gain trust to then grow on social media. What do consumers want? You and I are consumers. We all have mobile phones, some on the table, some in our pockets. We just want to hear from a person. We want transparency. And it's easier to hear that from a person because it's much harder to lie in front of your faces than it is to actually show nobody in front of a piece of content and just show what happens on farm and have some voice happening in the background. So people want to hear from people on social media. And that's what I hope for, that in the future, we live in a world in 2 or 3 years' time where there are many of us within all the farming businesses and operations within this room that can see others within our businesses producing content and telling our story. And New Zealanders know this. Hort New Zealand in 2024 launched a campaign on social license on social media, which has 1.5 million views and engaged over 250,000 people. So it's not new, but the way in which we as individuals consume and produce content or influence content within our businesses, that mindset needs to change. Now, I want to talk about rethinking negative PR as an opportunity. Because we've all had that bad moment, that bad day where there's been an environmental, issue or a runoff of chemicals or a labor issue or a food safety issue where there's been recalls and we don't know how to respond. And our immediate response is to stay quiet, people will forget it in 2 or 3 weeks, wait for the media cycle to continue. That simply does not work in 2026. Because if the only content, if the only footage that consumers see is negative, that's the public opinion that they get. We used to just send out a PR statement, wait for the media companies to take it on board, and then spread that information. That doesn't work on social media. We need to be there. We need to have the trust first to be able to communicate to that audience so that they don't have miscommunicated advice. Now, I'm going to tell you the story of a couple of years back when, I'm not too sure, maybe you guys can put your hands up. Do you remember there was a situation where people were snapping off broccoli stems and throwing them out at the till? Does anyone remember that case? Our industry didn't respond, and they didn't know how. But yet, retailers were putting up signs saying, you can't do this, this is, we're going to charge you. I stitched the video of a couple of people snapping that broccoli. I had already had over 50 million views. I had already done work with ABC on broccoli farms, and I interviewed a farmer about why the broccoli stem is not only the sweetest part with the most fiber and it's their favorite part, but also if you're buying it by unit, you're probably not even doing anything, like you could just take it home. But that piece of content had 10 million views. And I had built all of this content to build trust, to have a voice, to respond. And you don't need 40 million views, but we do need people speaking up, the people that are working within our industry, and we need to build that capability. And that's a moment where we can move from negative PR to an opportunity to showcase our story. And I really believe in that. If we didn't respond, and if I didn't respond or others didn't respond, and there were a lot of chefs that were also responding, the only content out there would be the negative content. And so there is a price, a cost of being silent. Now, everyone will ask me, Thanh, yes, I know, but in marketing, we've got $100,000 spend and you need to increase our sales by 500,000 so we can approve that marketing spend on social media. Now, whilst a lot of it can't be calculated, I'm going to give you an example of when I traveled to Chile. Now, Chile exports over $3 billion of cherries to China every year. And in 2024, there was a viral video of a lady eating the cherry, and there was like a black spot. It looked like mold, and a lot of consumers were concerned. They didn't think that the Chilean cherries were food safe. Now, remember, $3 billion, 10-week harvest window. And the Chilean cherry industry noticed that the price of cherries dropped the following week. Now, at $300 million of sales a week, that's a lot of money. So it is fathomable and it is financially recordable. But is it the main reason? No. But what did the Chilean cherry industry do? In 2025, they created an entire campaign on food safety, from picking the fruit in the orchard to packing it to sending it in the containers and arriving in China, so that they gave themselves the social license that if the issue came up again, they had something to fall back on. The industry were ready. They were on the correct platforms. So at an industry level, the cost of silence can be great, and we need to change our mindset about where social media fits. It's no longer just a marketing platform to sell a product, but it's also the license to operate. Now, I talk about the broccoli video because my video wouldn't have got to 10 million views if the algorithm was not controlling that moment. And I think about negative PR and these viral moments where we don't have control as a moment where it's free media. If we were to buy 10 million views, that would cost a lot of money through Meta or whichever platform, but it wouldn't be organic, it wouldn't be truthful, it wouldn't be someone who really believed in that message. And so we can change this narrative quite easily, but also be in the moment and get free media. So I think it's a great opportunity when these cases come, if we're ready to respond on those channels. Now, my father is 77 years old, and he does not have Facebook, he does not have Instagram, but for some reason he uses TikTok 2 hours a day. Who here uses TikTok? Put your hands up. Handful, right? Now, I want to talk about this idea of generation skipping technology and an assumption that I made before traveling the world researching social media. We think that technology is linear, that we start at paper, we move to radio, we go to TV, we then move to desktops, laptops, mobile phones, social media, AI. But that's not the case. You see, in China, most people in Asia never grew up with a desktop for the simple reason that the keyboard is in English. So they completely skip desktops and move straight to mobile. And they don't actually even type. They just press the record button and talk. See, we skip technology and we assume that sometimes the consumers are behind. My dad skipped Facebook and Instagram, went straight to TikTok. And now in China, there are 100,000 farmers live streaming, selling fruit and veg every day because consumers are seeing their face, knowing who the farmer is, and responding to that authenticity. We might skip that whole live streaming phase. I don't see it here in Australia or New Zealand, but we could skip that. So we should not assume where the consumer is at, but we should still believe that we want a people-to-people interaction in our lives. I want to talk about the role of social media in the world of AI. Now, AI has already changed our lives, and I ask you all a question. My children are 5 and 7 years old. Do you think in 5 years' time they're going to be Googling, searching where to eat, or where they're going to be asking an AI where their kiwi fruit came from? And where do you think that LLM is finding that information? Do you think it's scraping that data from Hort, New Zealand, or the kiwi fruit growers? Or do you think Google and Gemini is scraping that data off YouTube? Because I can tell you, if there's a 10 million view YouTube video, it is ranking that content much higher than everything else. So the truth now lies not only in our publications, but the way in which we communicate where consumers are at, which is social media. So it's more important than ever in a world of AI that we focus on where us as consumers are finding that information, because it's changing quickly and social media still plays a very important role. But where to next? And that's the question that I've had as a content creator working both in traditional and social media, as somebody working in fruit and veg, loves our industry and wants everyone to eat more fruit and veg. Well, I've been traveling the world over the last 18 months, interviewing content creators, seeing what works, looking at other industries like seafood over in Europe to see how they have been structuring content within their organizations, within their industries, to try to find best practice for us to move forward. And I have a number of recommendations. And it's actually really ironic. Who was here for Gilbert's speech just before? Put your hands up. He ended with a triangle: structure, mindset, and skill set. And ironically, these are the three things in my speech. Because I believe structurally, we need to change how we see content in our industries, organizations, farming businesses. We need to see it not just in the marketing pool, but in the communications pool. And the last time I checked, communications did not have a return on investment as a KPI. But that's the storytelling piece. We need to change our mindset individually, all of us, in terms of the way in which we create content needs to be conversational. It needs to be how we want content to be, not just kind of shoving down our perceived notion of what they should hear and hope that they listen to us. And we need the skill set. Everywhere where I traveled, industry bodies are now starting to build capability within. Because whilst creators play a role and agency plays a role in getting creators who already have trust, I want our industries to build trust from within so that we have a voice when there is a negative PR incident, or we are just telling our story right for the LLMs. There are many reasons why we need to start showing up where consumers are finding their information, their news, and their entertainment. I started with asking everybody about your phone and your infinite scroll. And I wanted to say that whether it's this week in Wellington or on your drive back home or your flight back home and you're scrolling, analyze how you watch your own content. Is it a person that you're looking at? And think, why isn't there content on my own industry, on the work that I do? And I want you to believe, and I want you to believe it yourself, because it will happen, that in the short-term future, 3 to 5 years' time, I want there to be some content about your own farming industry or business. You know, across the Tasman, Aussies and Kiwis always argue who creates the best produce. But I think that we've never had to argue that. We create some of the best produce in the world. Our opportunity is in showcasing that we create the best produce in the world and making people see it. So I hope that everybody got a little bit about what they wanted, a perception of how they create content, how they watch content. And the next time you scroll, I hope you have a changed mindset on social media and its role in the future. Thanks.